But having said that, it is obviously also of utmost importance to have a credible government in Kabul, and we must hold Karzai and his government to account and ensure.
Is Karzai credible?
He has promised now to step up the fight against corruption.
See, I ask you if Karzai is credible, you pause and say that he's promised something in the future. There are members of NATO, military operations involving thousands of troops, putting their lives on the line, partly under your control, for a man, for an Afghan government led by Hamid Karzai, who you cannot even say to me is credible at this moment in time.
Yeah, I am confident that he will commit himself to the fight against corruption, to the fight against drug trade, that he will provide a better governance, and to stress that, we will also call an international conference which will be held in London by the end of January to renew what I will call the contract between the international community and Karzai. But let me repeat, we are not in Afghanistan to protect and defend President Karzai or a specific government, but to defend ourselves against terrorism.
If you can't be sure that Karzai will deliver, and you're saying essentially he's on probation, how is it that Barack Obama can tell the American people that the drawdown of US troops will begin in 18 months?
Well, we all hope to see such progress during the next 18 to 24 months.
But that's just a hope. You don't know whether it'll be delivered or not.
No, and this is exactly the point.
So when Obama says we will begin to draw down troops in 18 months, is he not being straight with the Americans?
The Americans have made very clear right from the outset that this, of course, is a condition-based approach. The search, which has now been decided, will make room for a transition to Afghan lead, and we will gradually hand over responsibility to the Afghans, but on a condition-based, in a condition-based approach. We have to make sure that the Afghans are really capable to take on responsibility before we hand over responsibility to themselves.
Then I'm asking you, as Secretary General of NATO, do you echo Obama's opinion about when the drawdown of troops can begin, or like the UK government, which has refused to talk about timetables at all, are you leaving timeframes off the agenda? You're the Secretary General. What are you saying?
Yeah, but obviously we will stay committed, and we will stay as long as it takes to finish our job.
Well, I understand
obviously,
that, but will troops start coming out of Afghanistan, i.e. will the numbers start to be reduced within 18 months, as Obama says?
Yeah, we hope so, but nobody is in a position to make any guarantee, because it will really depend on development on the ground. When people ask, when will this mission end, then my answer is very clear. It will end the day when the Afghans are capable to defend and run the country themselves.
You've talked a lot about NATO's new strategic concept, and of course part of that is looking at the real ways in which Western security is threatened by terrorism, by rogue states, by all sorts of global threats. And I'm wondering where the logic takes NATO, because, for example, if we move a little further to the west, there's Iran. Now, the Iranians have a nuclear program which the United States and the European powers say is a collective security threat, and it must be stopped. If, say, China, Russia at the United Nations won't allow a tougher sanctions regime to be imposed, will NATO get involved? Will NATO start looking at military options with regard to Iran?
Right now, NATO is not engaged with Iran. The core purpose of NATO is territorial defense of allied members.
And as I say, members of NATO believe that Iran represents a threat.
Yes,
So
indeed.
at what point is NATO going to get involved?
Yeah, well, if Iran actually acquires nuclear capacity, then eventually it will be a challenge for NATO, because then it might be a question of defense of allied territory. And this is also
NATO has to take a view as to whether Iran is close to acquiring, because NATO members will then feel there is, if the UN route isn't working, there is a real cause for NATO intervention.
Yes, and not intervention. Right now, a number of countries are conducting international political and diplomatic efforts to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear capacity. What I was going to tell you is that we are currently considering the establishment of a missile defense within a NATO framework. And this is, of course, of relevance if Iran actually acquires a nuclear capacity.
But can you conceive of any circumstances in which NATO would be the framework, the forum, through which there would be collective action against Iran?
Not against Iran as such, but if Iran acquires a nuclear capacity, then it is also a question of the territorial defense of our member states.
But not before then?
Right now, a number of countries are trying through diplomatic and political channels to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear capacity.
And that will never involve NATO at that stage?
Not at that stage, but we are currently considering how we can establish a missile defense system.
Let me talk about Russia, because missile defense was one bone of contention between Russia and NATO, and it's gone away for the moment because Obama has withdrawn his specific missile defense plan. How would you characterize NATO's relationship with Russia today?
Actually, it's improving. We have...
forgive me, but I'm going to quote your own words. Just the other day at a council meeting, a Russia-NATO council, you used the word trust. You said we want a new beginning and a trusting relationship.
Yeah.
How can you have a trusting relationship with Russia?
Yeah, but we have made decisions during past weeks that contribute to an improved relationship between NATO and Russia. Of course, we have disagreements in some areas.
Well, let's get to this point. How can you have a trusting relationship with Russia, call Russia a partner, as you have done in recent days, when Russian support for the self-declared independence of Abkhazia and South Ossetia flagrantly violates international law?
We have disagreements with Russia over Georgia.
Well, how can you call Russia a partner,
we must insist on respect for Georgia's territorial integrity and sovereignty.
The Russians have shown no respect. You can insist as much as you like. The facts are that the Russians have shown no respect for that. They've recognized the independence of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Mm-hmm. How, in that situation, can you talk about partnership and respect with Moscow?
Yeah, but here we have a disagreement with Russia. But my point is that disagreements in some areas should not overshadow the fact that we do have shared interests with Russia in other areas, because we are faced with the same threats like terrorism, Afghanistan, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, piracy. And my point is that we should develop practical cooperation with Russia in those areas where we are faced with the same threats.
So unlike your predecessor, Mr. Schroeter, are you abandoning this sort of rhetorical commitment to Georgia and Ukraine being on the path to NATO membership? Because clearly you can't have both. If you want this partnership agreement and relationship with Russia, you're going to have to wave goodbye to the prospect of Georgia and Ukraine coming into NATO.
No, I have to stress that the decision we took at the NATO summit in Bucharest back in 2008 still stands.